People who have had amnesia and recovered. What was it like not knowing who you were? Serious replies only. Car accident. Didn't remember anything/anyone. Have a wife. Found out 2 weeks after accident that she's pregnant. Have tattoos. Ethnic. Gay parents. Fast forward 4 years. Still married to her. Never recovered my memory 100%. Have 2 sons. It sucks not remembering things from school. Past funny jokes and, do you remember when, moments. Apparently after the accident. While being put in the ambulance I had a freak out moment and hit an EMT while screaming, "Who am I?" Because I didn't know who I was or where I was. My mom was terrified and crying at the scene. That's the surface of it in a nutshell. PM any questions? I'm seeing a lot of car wreck and TBI stories. Suffered acute amnesia after chemotherapy caused me to have a stroke. Everything was in slow motion. Suddenly I couldn't read the book that was in my hands. Then I didn't know that the object in my hand was called a book. I looked up at my nurse and tried to speak. But, they tell me, my words were gibberish. I didn't just forget my name or who I was. I forgot what I was. I had no idea that my thoughts were being generated by a brain inside a body. People who witnessed it say I sang the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song under my breath for days, probably in an attempt to hold on to reality. When I started to regain some awareness, I couldn't distinguish dreams from reality. I thought I was in the hospital after being shot while running away from a drug cartel. The memory was so vivid. I was riding in the bed of a tan truck with a bunch of people. Dust was kicking around and people were shooting at me from the car following us. I woke up with the nurse over me. She was changing the dressing on my port, in my chest, and I asked her if they got the bullet out yet. I've never even been to Mexico. She played along. I would ask my family the same questions over and over. My aunt wrote down a list of FAQs that caregivers could read to me when I asked those questions. We did this for days and days, until I started to remember things again. Eventually, my brain healed and Jay recovered most of my memories. I still have a terrible time with short-term. Having unconditional love and patience from everyone around me was a great factor in my recovery. I hit my head pretty hard on the floor, bad stunt to impress the girls at school. I didn't lose consciousness, but I have no memories of that day. My mother told me later that it was the most frightening day of her life. I was asking her, what are we doing here? Where are my shoes? Every 5 minutes. The doctors asked me a series of questions to evaluate the severity of my amnesia. I could remember my name, my family, my school, but not the date or even the season. During a few hours my memory wasn't registering any new event. The very first new memory that I kept was the doctors making fun of me after one of my answers. They asked me who was our king and I answered Leopold I. I'm from Belgium. The next day my memory was working again, but I've definitively lost track of the accident, and I still have no idea of who stole my shoes. Your story about answering Leopold I made me think about when my mom had amnesia. This was in 2010 and she answered George Bush Sr. when asked who the president was. She also couldn't remember who Harry Potter was even though she had read all the books twice and we had been trying to plan a trip to the park that had just opened in Orlando. It was sorta scary, but still kinda funny. That's awesome. I'd love to be able to forget some of my favorite books. Not exactly full-blown, but after my father died I had bouts of randomly losing my memory and the occasional, forgot everything. Sometimes I forgot someone I had known for years. I would see their name and go, oh, I know that guy. I talked to him. I have no idea what he's like, or how I know him. I just know I know him. Huh. The other times I entirely forgot everything, which happened for only a few brief moments, but it felt so weird to feel. My mind just thought, where am I? I don't recognize anything. What's outside? Who do I hear in this house? And it gave me a really carefree feeling. I wasn't scared. I just knew nothing. I don't know if I could call that full-blown amnesia though. Apparently there are things I don't remember though. My mom will talk about the time we spent with my dad before he died in the hospital and some things I don't recall at all, and times after he died. It just went blank in some places. But I'm confident I know who I am today, so I have that going for me. Hey man, you should really go see a doctor. I am in a hospital. I accept that. I see my dad and ask him what happened. He laughs and answers, you face-palmed during a skate session. I touch my face, feel a big wound under my nose. Did my teeth go through my upper lip? Big laugh, no they didn't. Oh, I have a big wound on me cheek too. Giggling, yes you do. Dad, It feels like I have asked that before. Have. Biggest laughter. Yes, you have. Turns out my father had been sitting right next to my bed all day long answering these exact same questions the exact way. It was like a record with a scratch on it. I only remember this scene once. It took about 2 days until it got better. I lost about a week prior to the accident. The rest came back. To answer the question how it felt. To me it was a little bit like when you come into a room and forget why you were there. You know you should know what year is or what time of year, but you just don't and can't get it. I didn't panic or anything because I didn't know what I was missing actually. After time the memory came back step by step, just as when you remember why you went into the room and have a little arca moment. After being in a very abusive situation, I have no memory of the months surrounding and the aftermath that was my ex beating me while pregnant and that causing the miscarriage of our daughter. Eventually there was a trial and I cannot explain the horror of hearing friend and family and neighbors testify to what they saw and heard him do to me that I honest to God don't remember. When I hear it my reaction's always, oh that poor girl. TLDR blacked out a good 8 months of my life to PTSD. Clarification: my ex killed himself last year. He was 25, not our 7, almost 8-year-old son. My son is a happy, healthy, goofball who's blessed to know no one, but my very wonderful husband is his father. Again, please reach out to someone or rain.org for help if you are in a domestic violence situation. You are not to blame. You are not going to change them. They are not sorry. They will not stop. But you are worth more. In 3rd grade I took a pitch to the face at baseball practice and instantly got knocked out. When my eyes opened back up, I did not know what happened at all. I didn't feel pain, hear anything, or think of anything. Apparently my mom hopped the fence and slid into home to come grab me. When they started bringing me to the van my hearing came back and my brothers were all there talking about some fair that was supposed to be happening after practice and they were mad they couldn't go now. It was then that I felt my face and the pain sunk in and realized I'm fucked up. Ended up breaking my maxillary sinus bone, part of my eye socket, nose, and cheekbone. On top of it all was a major concussion and amnesia, plus I threw up for a day straight after that. They didn't let me sleep for a few days and used that time to help me understand who I was and where we live. Things like that. Eventually it all came back. My mom has basically documented my whole childhood with scrapbooks, so that was very helpful in regaining my memory. The only tough part was going back to school and remembering all my classmates. They all supported me and helped me adjust back into school. I made a full recovery and now it's just a crazy story to talk about. Welcome back to school. Did you bring the $20 you owe me? I've had momentary amnesia twice due to heavy metal poisoning. The first time I was driving home and was only a block or 2 from my house, in the neighborhood I grew up in, driving a car I'd owned for 5 years. I don't remember what it felt like just before the onset, but I know I was simply driving down the road. No trauma, no real trigger. And I just forgot everything. I was still moving when it happened, so I pulled over and sat. I remember at first I thought I just couldn't remember where I was going. Then I realized I didn't know where I was coming from. It took me about 10 seconds to realize I didn't remember who I was and had no idea whose car I was driving. I had turned my flashers on when I pulled over, but realized if a cop came along and asked me any questions, I'd have no idea what to say, so I turned off the flashers and then the engine so it would look like I was just parked. I think I sat there for about 10 minutes. Strangely, I remember actually being a little bemused. Sort of a feeling of, well, this is new. I remember getting a huge chill, like, where you shake for a second. I also remember being a little paranoid about whether the car was stolen. No idea why. I just concentrated on trying to remember anything. After a few minutes, I remembered my first name, and that seemed to be a key, or maybe it was just time, as one by one, things started coming back to me. It happened once more when I was in my girlfriend's apartment, where I was living, and was putting silverware away. It felt like I'd just woken up and couldn't remember anything. I remember looking at her and thinking she was cute and wondering if I should talk to her or if she was married. I walked into the other room and saw a cute baby and sat down and played with him. It was my son, but I had no idea who it was. This time I felt ashamed. I sat and watched TV until my memory came back, but was paranoid that the woman was going to kick me out or figure out that I was just blank. It went away in about 10 minutes. I didn't tell her until the next day. Not sure if this counts, but I was in grad school and I was about to take the hardest midterm of my life. My boyfriend broke up with me, leaving me with a 2-bedroom lease on my own, after I suspected he was cheating on me. I was studying in the library and out of nowhere I legitimately forgot how to read or write. I tried to text my dad and looked at it later and it was nonsensical. I called the doctor and was told this sometimes happens when someone's overloaded mentally. It went away after a few hours but scared the shit out of me. Not sure if this has ever happened to anyone else. And surprise, I failed the midterm. I experienced loss of events and memory following the death of one of my children. It was 2 or 3 years before I had the nerve to ask my husband about the things I blanked out. I wasn't afraid. I was angry and confused. I consulted my doctor and he told me it would have been impossible to remember every tiny detail of my life during that time. He checked me out, said I was healthy, no stroke, etc. In my case, my doctor believed I was in and out of a state of shock. I didn't forget who I was. I forgot events on and off for a couple of months. For example, I had no memory of whether or not I had been paid during the time I was off work. I had to ask our administrative assistant in private. I can't remember certain conversations or how I completed work in advance for the person who replaced me temporarily. I was told it was partial amnesia due to shock. I had always prided myself on my memory. Eventually, some of it came back. Okay, well, this just blew my mind a bit. Your post really struck a chord with me and I was thinking back to the death of my child. I can't remember anything of that week. Absolutely nothing. I remember standing in the line at the hospital when they came to tell me, but not going upstairs again. Or the days after that. And I only have a brief memory of the funeral and nothing after that again. This is going to bug me for a while now. I had electric shock therapy about 3 weeks ago, and it took away my memory entirely for a few hours, including my name, speech, and basic motor functions, with gradual improvement since. It's been a pretty mixed experience. At first, I was panicked and hated the feeling of relying on everyone else to tell me who I was and what I should be doing. After the initial shock, it became like a fun game trying to remember things and discovering things about myself along the way. Oh hey, I have a tattoo. Once the magic wore off, it got pretty crummy. I don't remember most of my culinary schooling or job training, which has caused problems at my work. Attempting to relearn to drive a stick shift has been a nightmare, and I've been pulled over twice because the policeman thought I was drunk when I really just couldn't shift properly. I've had to be reminded of friends I've lost, details of my mom's cancer, and general life struggles like bills and how to take care of myself. I'm having to be told who I am and what I should be doing while trying to figure out who I feel like I am. That's just a sampling. Hopefully more of my memory comes back, but I don't know how much of it will, if any. On the plus side, maybe it's a chance to redefine how I see myself. Not sure if that was the point of the therapy, but I guess in a way it's working. TLDR. It feels like I've had to take over someone else's life, and I'm just trying not to screw it up worse than they have. Fake it till you make it, right? Edit. Since people are asking, the ECT was for resistant depression. I believe it's also used to treat bipolar disorder, though. Dissociative amnesia, which was assumed to be a combination of an excessive amount of sleeping pills and PTSD. It wasn't my first rodeo taking that many pills at a time, but I had absolutely no idea why. I spent about a year in the hospital surrounded by nurses waiting for me to make another attempt on my life while I struggled to figure out who I was and how to function as a person living in a maximum security environment. In my experience, I couldn't remember the people in my life, what my face looked like, or even what ice cream tasted like. I had the opportunity to re-experience life again, and I believe it saved me. I've never taken the time to figure out my past. It just doesn't exist. My mother-in-law had meningitis about 10 years ago, and still has bad long-term memory. She remembers very little about my wife growing up. We dug out their wedding album and had a good laugh at 70s clothes, hair, etc. And she ran out of the room. We found her crying in her bedroom because she can't remember her wedding day. This makes me so sad. I got a concussion during a high school hockey game. I was a freshman at the time and went to hit someone who was the size of Chara in comparison to me. He raised his elbow when I went in and my vision got really dark and green. For some reason it didn't really bother me. I even went back out onto the ice for 3 or 4 shifts and scored. It wasn't until I got back to the bench when one of my teammates looked at me and said that I was bleeding pretty profusely. Trainer came over and asked me a whole bunch of questions like, "Where are we?" or "What day is it?" He then asked me to repeat a bunch of numbers. Couldn't remember a single one. I had no idea what I was saying or doing. When my dad came over to the locker room to take me to the hospital, my response to him was, "Who are you?" It was some pretty scary stuff. I suffered from reflex anoxic seizures. Basically, your heart stops beating for a little while and starts up again. When I wake up, I have 5 to 10 minutes of no memory. Can't talk, can't write, can't even think, as I didn't have the words to think with. Very weird. Like knowing you are in a dream and have to wake up but you're already awake. I woke up in the middle of the night a few months ago, with no memory of me. I woke up my husband and asked him, "What's my name?" He thought I was joking, so he told me, "Joe Dirt." I started crying because it was such an ugly name, and that must mean my life was ugly too. He realized I wasn't kidding and tried telling me my real name, but it took me a while to stop crying long enough to listen. Now he feels really bad about it, as well he should. My so fell off her horse the beginning of this year, quite bad. Luckily I was there and immediately got an ambulance on the way. Took them 30 to 40 minutes for them to arrive. I was holding her head still as possible, and for the first 20 minutes she was completely non-responsive, then opened her eyes but couldn't speak till the ambulance got there. The next week or so after that she forgot everything from the moment she hit her head onwards. The amount of stuff I had to repeat, sometimes every minute, was painful. She still doesn't remember anything from that week or two, which worries me as she doesn't realize what she did to herself and isn't going to think twice about it. I have literally no memory of my life before 14/15. I had an emotional break. I was attacked. I remember the attack. Unfortunately, I've tried and only gained back 2 very disjointed, and honestly unless they had been confirmed I'd have thought they weren't real memories. I did keep diaries when I was younger, but they just read how you would expect a child to write. Am I me is the big question. It was hard, and unfortunately I went through an extremely rough time. I tried to kill myself and I prayed for death for about 4 years. I had other problems. My father didn't believe in psychological care and tried to discipline it out of me. It failed. I didn't know who I was. I was living with strangers and they wondered why I didn't feel close to them. I don't think I'll ever be comfortable with who I am. I was told I was a happy child, though my diaries kinda say I stopped being happy at least 2 years before the attack. I'm still suffering with depression, however I'm not sure if it's related. My immediate family has passed on now. I'm so sorry. I can't imagine going through this. I appreciate the support. Okay. So mine was pretty minor, but still. Well, it's hard to describe. Short version. I accidentally drank an entire pint of Everclear when I was about 19. My last memory of that night was the world turning black and white, then passing out. I won't talk about what I apparently did while blacked out because I don't remember any of it and only have second and third hand accounts of my asshattery. What I do remember was the next morning. I woke up in bed. I didn't know where I was. More importantly, I realized I didn't know who I was. That realization was huge. I knew that, somehow, everything about the world was on the other side of that one thing. Who I was. I didn't panic. I wasn't hurt, or hungover, don't ask. I heard the details of me being made okay later. I actually felt great. Except I had no knowledge of anything. It was like the entire world was new, only I could feel that I should know things, and if only I could remember who I was sure everything else would come with that. I have no idea how long I just sat there on the edge of my bed, looking around, groping inside myself for any anchor to grab onto, but it ended all at once. Suddenly, I knew who I was, and with that all my memories and knowledge came flooding back to me along with my realization of self. It was really humbling, realizing that I'm one brain injury from not existing as myself. Not about me, but fun story. One of my good friends hit his head pretty hard while sledding. Forgot all his friends, family, etc. I was showing him pictures of all of our friends on Facebook, trying to jog his memory when he came across a picture of his girlfriend. He had no idea who she was, but he was going on and on about how beautiful she was, and he was absolutely shocked when I told him that she was dating him. They're getting married in August and I'm one of the groomsmen. Can't wait to share that story with everyone.